Picture this. A worker in rural Texas cracks open an ordinary boulder. Inside, an iron hammer with a wooden handle, sealed in rock that formed 400 million years ago. Or this. 3 gem hunters in California split open what looks like a hollow rock. Inside, a cylindrical metal object that matches precision-engineered machinery down to the millimeter. Or this. A factory worker in Austria splits a coal block. Out falls a geometric metal cube. The coal around it is 60 million years old. These aren't legends. These are documented finds. Photographed. Some sitting in museums right now. Scientists call them out-of-place artifacts. Objects that, if you trust the geology, should not exist where they were found. If the rock dating holds, some of these objects are older than the dinosaurs, which means either everything we know about life on Earth is wrong, or the explanation is so obvious that conspiracy theorists simply refuse to see it. Today, 5 objects pulled from solid rock. Why they made headlines. What theories they launched. What the evidence actually says. The truth is every bit as strange as the conspiracy. Sometimes more. London, Texas, not England. A town small enough that everyone knows everyone, with a creek running through limestone hills just outside it. 1936. A couple named Max and Emma Hahn are walking along Red Creek when Emma spots something that stops her cold. A piece of wood sticking straight out of solid rock, not resting against it, embedded inside it. They take the rock home, leave it on the porch for 10 years. Then their son cracks it open. Inside, an iron hammer, wooden handle, iron head, completely intact. Sealed inside limestone that, based on its mineral composition, belongs to the Ordovician period. The Ordovician ended 443 million years ago. No land animals, no forests, no insects. The most complex life on dry ground was a thin skin of primitive moss on wet rock, and apparently someone had lost a hammer there. The hammer sits as a local curiosity for decades. Then, in 1983, Carl Bohr gets hold of it. Bohr runs the Creation Evidence Museum in Glen Rose, Texas, built entirely around the argument that mainstream geology is wrong and the Earth is only a few thousand years old. For him, this hammer isn't interesting. It's a weapon. He makes bold claims. The wooden handle is turning into coal, proof of extreme age. The iron alloy matches nothing in known metallurgical history. This tool, he says, belonged to people who lived before Noah's flood. The Internet finds it in the early 2000s and loses its mind. Forums, documentaries, books. The hammer gets shared millions of times. Comment sections fill with people who have decided that mainstream science is a coordinated deception, and this hammer is the crack in the wall. If someone built iron tools 400 million years ago, then every textbook about human origins is not just incomplete, it's a lie. And Carl Bohr, standing in his museum in Glen Rose, Texas, becomes a prophet. In 1985, anthropologist John Cole publishes an explanation. One word: concretion. Groundwater moving through rock carries dissolved minerals. When it hits a foreign object, any object, those minerals deposit around it. Layer by layer, decade by decade. They harden into a shell that looks and feels exactly like natural rock. The minerals in that shell can be ancient, hundreds of millions of years old. But the hardening process happened recently. Think of it this way. Pour fresh concrete using sand from a 400 million year old desert. The concrete is new. The sand is ancient. The age of the ingredients is not the age of the object. That distinction is everything. Limestone concretions form around modern objects constantly, bottles, boots, tools. Documented cases everywhere. The process takes decades, not epochs. The hammer itself matches American mining hammers from the 1840s to 1880s exactly. This region had active mining communities throughout that era. Most likely, a miner lost his hammer near the creek 150 years ago. The mineral-rich water did the rest. Here's what ends it. In 40 years, Karl Bohr has never allowed an independent scientist to examine the hammer. Every request refused. No carbon dating, no chemical analysis, nothing. When you claim proof that rewrites human history and spend 4 decades refusing to let anyone check, the refusal is the evidence. Mojave Desert, California. February 1961. 3 gem shop owners, Wallace Lane, Mike Mikesell, Virginia Maxey, drive into the desert hunting geodes near Olancha. Mikesell sets up his diamond saw to cut one open. The blade stops. Metal inside. He cuts carefully around it, pulls the halves apart. Inside, a perfectly cylindrical ceramic object with a metal rod through its center. Precise, symmetrical, manufactured-looking. Virginia Maxey contacts a geologist. He examines the fossil material surrounding the object and tells her it dates to approximately 500,000 years ago. 500,000 years old, with something that looks like engineered machinery sealed inside. The story hits newspapers within days, international coverage within weeks. Ancient technology. A pre-human civilization with machine manufacturing. Or the version that travelled fastest, extraterrestrial visitors who left equipment behind and whose hardware got absorbed into the geological record over 500,000 years. The ancient astronaut community adopts it immediately. It appears in dozens of books. The photographs circulate for 60 years. Pierre Stromberg and Paul Heinrich take it seriously enough to actually investigate. By the time they get involved, the object has vanished into private hands. But they have X-rays, technical drawings, precise measurements. They open an automotive parts catalogue from the 1920s. The Koso artifact is a champion spark plug, made in the United States in the early 1920s. Ceramic insulator, copper rod, steel casing, every dimension identical down to the millimeter. The mystery of the ages was a car part. The fossilized material surrounding it? Hardened clay and mineral deposits. Exactly what forms around any discarded object left in alkaline desert soil for a few decades. Someone drove through the Mojave in the 20s, threw out a worn spark plug. Desert did what deserts do. 30 years later, gem hunters found it and called it ancient. Stromberg and Heinrich were clear. The finders weren't lying. They were gem shop owners who didn't know geology or car parts. The confusion was genuine. The artifact was not. What's worth sitting with is how the story spread anyway. How the unnamed geologist, the one who supposedly dated the material to 500,000 years, was never identified, never quoted directly, never asked to show his work. Virginia Maxey told reporters about him, and then he vanished from the record entirely. A key witness who cannot be questioned. A central claim that cannot be traced. And from that untraceable claim, 60 years of books and lectures and documentaries were built. 500,000 years old. It was a spark plug from the Harding administration. Massachusetts, 1851. Workers blast rock on Meeting House Hill in Dorchester. The formation, Roxbury conglomerate, Ediacaran period, 570 million years ago. Before fish, before insects, before anything grew on land. After one blast, workers find something in the rubble. A bell-shaped metal vessel split in two by the explosion. 4.5 inches tall. Zinc-silver alloy. Outside, 6 inlaid silver flowers and a silver vine around the base. Ornate, deliberate, made by someone who cared how it looked. Scientific American runs it June 5, 1852. That publication gives it a 170-year lifespan. If this vessel was sealed inside 570-million-year-old rock, then beings with mastered metallurgy and decorative craft existed before the first animal with a backbone ever swam in the ocean. Creationists cite it as pre-flood evidence. A religious movement dates it to 100,000 years ago. UFO researchers see alien craftsmanship. It's still being cited in books published last year. One, nobody can prove it was inside the rock. It was found in rubble after a dynamite blast, which scatters debris across a wide area from multiple layers and depths. The vessel could have been in topsoil above the bedrock, in a crack between formations, on the surface of the hill. Nobody tracked where each piece of debris came from. They were clearing a construction site. 2. Archaeologists who studied the photograph identified it quickly. It matches Victorian decorative objects, candle holders, pipe holders, common in the mid-1800s. In 1964, researcher Biagio Catalano found an almost identical object in the Prince of Wales Museum in Mumbai. 3. And this ends it. The vessel disappeared shortly after discovery. Cannot be examined, cannot be dated, cannot be analyzed. The entire case rests on one newspaper article from 1852 and a photograph of uncertain origin. That's it. That's the evidence. This case isn't about what was in that rock. It's about how one uncritical paragraph in a 19th century magazine generates 170 years of momentum. How little it takes to keep a myth alive once it's moving. Scientific American printed a curious account. Not a verified discovery, not a peer-reviewed find. A curious account. And from that single paragraph, an entire mythology grew. Books, lectures, websites, millions of citations. All traceable back to one reporter who didn't ask the right questions in 1852. The lesson isn't just about ancient artifacts. It's about how we consume information, how quickly we decide something is true because it appeared somewhere credible. How rarely we ask, who verified this? What happened to the object? Why can't we test it? Russia. Early 1990s. A group called Kosmopoisk Space Search investigates a suspected meteorite impact site 150 miles southwest of Moscow. One rock sample stops everyone, partially protruding from its surface, an object that looks exactly like a bolt, about a centimeter long. Regular, evenly spaced threads wound around it in a precise helix. Paleontological analysis. Carboniferous period. 300 to 320 million years ago. Giant dragonflies. First amphibians learning how legs work. An X-ray, they claim, reveals a second identical object hidden deeper in the same rock, a machine-threaded bolt inside rock from 300 million years ago. Kosmopoisk announces proof of a technological civilization predating humanity by hundreds of millions of years, or physical evidence of a spacecraft that crashed to Earth before mammals existed. The story goes international fast. Ancient astronaut community adopts it immediately, still cited today as serious physical evidence of paleocontact. Show any paleontologist the photograph. They don't need tests. One look. It's a fossilized crinoid stem. Crinoids are animals, relatives of starfish and sea urchins, called sea lilies, though they're not plants. They peaked in diversity during exactly the Carboniferous era when this rock formed. The stem is built from disc-shaped segments stacked vertically, like coins in a column, each slightly different in diameter. When the animal dies and tissue breaks down, what remains is a cylindrical fossil with perfectly regular, evenly spaced rings along its length. A fossilized crinoid stem is visually, structurally, almost indistinguishable from a threaded metal bolt. Geologists find them by the thousands on every continent in Carboniferous rock. They are the most common fossil in this formation. What Kosmopoisk found was extraordinary only to people who had never studied the Carboniferous period. Kosmopoisk never allowed independent specialists to examine the sample. No chemical composition published, no X-ray data shared, no peer review submission. They announced, guarded, let the story circulate on its own momentum. Here's what that means in practice. A claim goes global. It gets cited in books, repeated in documentaries, embedded in the minds of millions of people. And the one thing that could settle it, handing the rock to an independent lab, never happens. The mystery stays alive not because the evidence is strong, but because the evidence was never tested. A discovery that cannot be independently verified is not a discovery. It's a claim. And claims without open evidence can be dismissed without detailed argument. That's not bias against unusual findings. It's the only thing separating knowledge from rumour. Austria, 1885. This one is different. It actually exists. It's in a museum right now. Anyone can visit it. And it still doesn't have a completely clean explanation. Foundry worker Riedel splits coal blocks from a mine in Wolfsegg. His hammer hits something that doesn't break the way coal breaks. He opens it carefully. Inside, a metal object, roughly cubic, 2.5 inches per side, close to 2 pounds. 2 faces slightly convex rather than flat. Running around the entire perimeter, a deep, deliberate groove. The object goes to a local museum. In 1886, geology professor Adolf Goerlt writes it up for Nature, one of the world's most respected scientific journals. He suggests it might be a meteorite, the brown coal surrounding it, Tertiary period, 20 to 60 million years old. If this object was inside that coal from the beginning, it predates the first primate by tens of millions of years. Something geometrically regular, made of iron, existed when our oldest ancestors were small, frightened creatures hiding from predators in the dark. The paranormal community gets it in the 20th century, and the story evolves. The cube becomes a perfect steel artifact, a component of an ancient machine, a fragment of an alien probe absorbed by sedimentary rock over millions of years. A rumour circulates for decades. The cube vanished from the Salzburg Museum in 1910. Hidden, suppressed. Too inconvenient for official science to leave in public view. The cube never disappeared. It's in the Heimathaus Municipal Museum in Vöcklerbruck, Austria. Has been continuously since transfer. A cast is in the Upper Austrian State Museum in Linz. Open to any visitor today. Analysed by electron beam microanalysis at the Vienna Museum of Natural History in 1966 and 1967. Results: iron with carbon admixture, consistent with cast iron. 2 credible explanations. First, an iron meteorite. They fall constantly, take unusual shapes in the atmosphere, and can become encased in compressing organic material over geological time. The groove may be differential weathering or tectonic stress. Second, industrial byproduct, foundry waste introduced into the coal seam through a crack or collapse. Mines and coal have coexisted for centuries. Here is what's genuinely true. We don't know for certain. The worker kept no records, no documentation of which layer it was in, or whether the surrounding rock was undisturbed. That uncertainty is real. But we're not certain is not the same sentence as therefore ancient civilization. Honest uncertainty requires honest investigation, not the nearest exciting story. The cube sits in an open museum available to any researcher, and still gets described online as mysteriously vanished, hidden by authorities. That tells you more about how these stories function than anything the cube itself could reveal. The conspiracy isn't in the museum, it's in the retelling. Each time the story passes through another set of hands, one detail gets quietly changed, one fact gets quietly dropped, until the object that anyone can visit becomes the object that was secretly hidden. That's not a cover-up. That's just how myths work. 5 objects, 5 countries, 2 centuries of argument. Look at what they share. Not one was found by a professional geologist during a systematic excavation. Every single one discovered by accident. Miners, construction workers, gem hunters, foundry men. No training in documentation, no framework for interpretation, no tools for establishing geological context. In every case, the age came from the rock, not the object. And rock is not a sealed vault. Water moves through it. Minerals migrate. A modern object can end up inside ancient stone in decades and look to the untrained eye like it's been there since the beginning. And in every case, when scientists offered a simple explanation, it was dismissed. Not tested, not challenged on its merits. Dismissed as too boring, too convenient, part of a conspiracy. Here is the thought experiment that cuts through all of it. If a technological civilization existed on Earth hundreds of millions of years ago, not one hammer, an entire civilization, it would have left evidence everywhere. We find fossilized worm tracks from 500 million years ago, dinosaur feather impressions, pollen from plants extinct for 30 million years. The geological record is extraordinarily detailed. A civilization leaves chemical signatures, structural remains, tool marks, processing waste, on a massive scale across every continent. 5 disputed objects over 200 years of searching is not evidence of a lost civilization. It is background noise. But here's what actually matters. The concretion process, mineral-rich groundwater transforming a 150-year-old lost hammer into something that looks Ordovician, is itself remarkable. Understanding it tells you more about geological chemistry than any mystery documentary ever could. The fossilized crinoid, a sea creature dead 300 million years, whose segmented stem looks like precision machining, is more astonishing than a bolt from space. Because it's real. Because it tells you something true about biological geometry and deep time. Real science doesn't drain the world of wonder. It trades one mystery for something deeper. Every time we replace a convenient story with an actual answer, the actual answer turns out stranger and more interesting than what we invented. Notice the pattern across all 5 stories. Someone finds something unusual. Someone without training declares it ancient. A community with an agenda adopts it. And when scientists offer the simple answer, it gets dismissed, not because it's wrong, but because it isn't exciting enough. That pattern never includes independent verification. Open data. The basic procedures of actual knowledge. A real scientist doesn't believe or disbelieve in ancient civilizations. A real scientist says, "Show me the object. Let me test it. Publish the results. Let someone else repeat the experiment." If the mystery survives all of that, then we have something worth talking about. But none of these 5 objects ever made it past step 1. None of them were handed over. None of the owners said, "Here, take it, check it, prove me wrong." And that silence repeated across 5 different objects, 5 different countries, 5 different decades, is itself a pattern worth noticing. The world is full of genuine mysteries that don't need to be invented. 5 ambiguous objects over 200 years of searching is not the story of a hidden truth. It's the story of how badly we want one, and what we're willing to overlook to find it. Which of these 5 felt most convincing before we broke it down? Tell me in the comments. I read them. Subscribe. There are a lot more stories ahead about things that shouldn't exist and what they actually are.